Over the last few months, Fair Play for Women has been looking at the trans inclusion policies of our major sports and engaging with the sports councils. And I'd like to briefly share a few of the observations that we've made. Firstly, not one of the national governing bodies of any of our major sports have chosen to invoke the single-sex exemptions when it comes to trans people. Instead, every trans eligibility policy that we've seen now relies on the concept of testosterone suppression in males to supposedly bring down their performance to female levels. Now, that is a concept that we know is scientifically flawed. And to make things worse, none of these policies even define how low that testosterone has to be. Policies say things like, testosterone should be in the range of her affirmed gender, or a doctor has deemed that any gender-related advantage has been minimised, not even eliminated, just minimised. Secondly, not one of the national governing bodies of any of our major sports have considered how their eligibility rules would actually be fairly or reliably implemented on the ground. Most consider it sufficient that compliance is simply verified annually with nothing more than a doctor's note. But it's not that simple. Studies show that very few trans women on hormone therapy even manage to get their testosterone down to female levels. And even if they do get them down to female levels, we know that missing hormone therapy for just one day is enough for testosterone to rebound. Now remember, if that was a female athlete getting a short boost of testosterone, that would be considered illegal doping. Some drugs used for transition are banned by the anti-doping agencies because they're either masking agents for other drugs or are performance enhancing in males. So being trans means that they will get a medical exemption for drugs that are normally banned in other athletes. The monitoring of hormone levels in trans athletes doesn't even fall under the UK anti-doping's testing remit. And even if it did, there are no routine tests set up to monitor testosterone that's produced naturally by the testes. So it would take years for a robust system to be put in place. And anyway, the vast majority of sporting competition actually happens at club level, where there won't be any funding for any testing to even happen at all. So this means that the likelihood of intentional or accidental non-compliance is high. Now, we were shocked that these policies were so ill-defined when both the fairness and safety in female sport surely depends on having robust, evidence-based eligibility rules that can be effectively monitored. It's simply not good enough, and female sport deserves better than this. And of course, if male athletes start playing as women, then that will have implications for our single-sex changing rooms and shared accommodation on any residential trips. Not because males who identify as women are transgender, but because they are male, and we normally keep males and females separate when undressing, washing, or sleeping. Because this is one of the most basic safeguarding principles that women have. Sports clubs have a duty of care towards their athletes, especially in light of some of the recent catastrophic failings and abuse scandals that we've seen in recent years, and many times including children. So we've seen NGBs, the national governing bodies, misquoting UK equality law, saying that it would actually be illegal to refuse a trans person entry into a female changing room. It is not illegal. One NGB dismisses the potential risks of allowing males to self-identify into female changing rooms. They said, "We are confident that clubs would be able to tell the difference between someone who is genuine in their intention to live permanently in the opposite gender and someone who has an ulterior motive for accessing these facilities." Now, it is naive at best to suggest that volunteers or staff would be able to determine on site who is and who isn't genuine and to be confident enough to act accordingly. The pressure this would put on club managers and volunteers is clearly unreasonable and unworkable. And even if someone is genuine in their intention to live as a woman, does that make it any more acceptable for a woman or a girl to see a naked male body next to them in the showers? This is as much about a woman's right to privacy as it is about her safety. But we are not seeing the privacy and comfort of women and girls being given proper consideration. One NGB policy states, should their discomfort continue, they, the girls, may arrive ready changed for their activity. So here we have an example of girls being excluded from their own changing rooms in the name of inclusion. And this can't be right. We have even seen some trans policies that directly contradict safeguarding best practice within the same organisation. So safeguarding policy at Swim England is very clear that clubs and schools should separate the sexes of school-aged children in mixed changing villages. Now, this is sensible, common sense guidance that we all expect and take for granted. However, Swim England also published a trans inclusion policy that directly contradicted that by saying that children should be allowed to choose the changing rooms of whichever gender they felt appropriate. Now, after complaints, Swim England hurriedly withdrew their policy, and they now tell us that that is under review. But the litigation risk being carried by sport clubs with these ill-thought-through trans inclusion policies is clearly very high, and this is something that their legal departments really should be taking notice of, because there will be legal action, either from women or girls bringing harassment claims against clubs because their safeguarding policies have created an intimidating or humiliating or offensive environment for females, or there'll be victimisation claims brought by trans people for being called out by staff as imposters. So trans inclusion policies do not just impact a few trans people. They have far-reaching consequences across the whole of the sporting business. And they really should not just be left to the diversity and equality team. Safeguarding, compliance, legal and the insight and engagement teams really must start to play an active role guiding this policy development too. So Fair Play for Women has been engaging with the sports councils and will continue to do so over the coming months to make sure that the sex-based rights of women are properly considered this time in the next round of policy development. This time, we will be making sure that the right questions are being asked and that the next set of trans policies are both evidence-based and fair for everyone, because that is the very least that we should all expect.